The ballroom was glowing with futuristic brilliance. Drones hovered gently above a sea of sleek suits and sparkling gowns, while artificial intelligence panels buzzed with the brightest minds in Silicon Valley. But in the middle of all that elegance and innovation, chaos suddenly shattered the illusion. A man in a plain gray suit was being shoved across the polished marble floor by two oversized security guards. Cameras turned, eyebrows raised, gasps echoed around the room like ricocheting bullets. "Sir, you're not on the list," one guard barked, his grip firm and unapologetic. The man didn't yell. He didn't push back. He simply looked around, calm yet heart-wrenchingly out of place. His name was Senator John Kennedy, and not a single soul seemed to realize who he was. Except one person, a college student named Riley, whose trembling fingers raised her phone and hit record. What happened next unfolded like a digital wildfire. But let's freeze here for a second. Imagine being humiliated in front of hundreds of billionaires, tech giants, and global media, not for something you did wrong, but because of how you looked. No security badge, no expensive suit, just decency and humility, mistaken for irrelevance. As the guards shoved him toward the exit, the main stage lights brightened. Elon Musk walked out with a smirk and a mic. "Well," he joked to the crowd, pointing in the general direction of the disturbance, "looks like even AI can't stop Grampus from sneaking into invite-only events." The audience erupted with laughter, but Riley kept recording. And Senator Kennedy? He didn't flinch. Not a word. Just kept walking, shoulders squared, heart heavy. That night, the video Riley posted hit 2 million views in under 4 hours. People couldn't believe it. "That's a U.S. senator," one comment said. "Why did no one recognize him?" another wrote. And while the public buzzed with questions, Kennedy sat quietly at home, not plotting revenge, but reflecting on a moment that revealed something far uglier than a PR slip. It exposed a world where status is judged by appearance, and power often drowns out humility. But before we move on, I want to ask you something real. If you had been in that room, would you have stood there in silence? Or would you have pulled out your phone, like Riley did? Be honest. If your answer is yes, I want you to like this video and comment the number 9 right now, because you're the kind of person who helps stories like this get seen. Back in that shimmering ballroom, no one knew what kind of storm was about to hit. Elon was still basking in the applause, unaware that just 20 feet away, a video was being uploaded that would soon circle the globe. Riley didn't know who the man was at first, but the moment she watched the footage again and zoomed in on his face, her breath caught. She Googled his name. Then she gasped. "That was Senator John Kennedy," she whispered aloud. And just like that, the narrative flipped. In the coming hours, no PR team, no algorithm, no AI could stop the reckoning that was about to unfold. 24 hours earlier, Senator John Kennedy stood quietly at the edge of his driveway in Louisiana, the early morning sun casting long shadows over his modest sedan. He wasn't wearing a designer suit or traveling with a staff. He carried no entourage, no press, and no expectations. Just a printed invitation to the Future of AI and Human Ethics Forum, hosted by Elon Musk's foundation. The event promised an open dialogue between tech visionaries, ethicists, and public servants. For Kennedy, it was a rare chance to listen and learn, to see firsthand where the future was heading. So he packed a single bag, boarded a quiet flight to California, and arrived at the sleek glass building hours before the crowd swelled. He entered with humility, greeted the check-in staff with a soft, "Morning, ma'am," and presented his name. The intern at the desk blinked at the screen, confused. I don't see a VIP badge here. Mr. Kennedy?" she said, trying to match the name to the powerful image she expected from the invite list. "That's all right," he replied kindly. "I'm happy to sit in the back and listen." She nodded hesitantly and handed him a generic guest pass, the kind given to sponsors and junior developers, not senators. He clipped it on without a word and moved through the lobby like any other man. The event was a spectacle. Robots dancing with humans, live AI art generators projecting onto massive screens, and influencers interviewing CEOs in neon-lit corners. Kennedy, in his simple suit and worn leather shoes, looked completely out of place. But he wasn't there to impress. He leaned in during panels, jotted notes in a small notebook, and nodded quietly as researchers spoke. His presence was invisible to most. To some, he was simply that old guy. But not everyone was blind. Midway through the afternoon, a young security guard named Leon noticed him. He paused, looked twice. "Wait, is that?" he muttered under his breath. He'd seen Kennedy on the news before. Leon's supervisor, a man named Jared, was walking by. "You recognize him?" Jared asked, suspicious. "I think that's a senator," Leon said. Jared scoffed. "Doubt it. No one sent clearance. Could be some crank who printed a fake badge." And just like that, the seed was planted. Hours later, that suspicion would bloom into humiliation. Back inside the conference, Kennedy wandered into a restricted zone unintentionally. He was following a small group of guests into a lounge labeled AI Ethics Roundtable. The sign was half covered by a folding chair. As soon as he stepped in, Jared got the call. "We got an unknown male in the VIP lounge," came the report through the earpiece. Jared smirked. "I knew it," he muttered. "Let's clean this up." What followed was less a removal and more a show. 2 guards stormed in, one grabbing Kennedy's arm, the other raising his voice. "You don't belong here, sir. This is a private event. Time to go." Kennedy blinked, caught off guard, but kept his composure. "Gentlemen, if there's been a mistake, I'm happy to step out. No need for force." But they didn't care. They saw a man without a VIP pass, without a camera crew, without power. They saw someone they could control. Jared followed behind them as they led Kennedy through the main ballroom, pushing past clusters of executives and influencers. That was when Riley, a college student from Berkeley attending on scholarship, spotted the scene. She saw the man's face, confused but composed. She didn't know his name yet, but something didn't sit right. Why were they dragging him like a criminal? She pulled out her phone and hit record. And that's when Elon walked onto the stage. Timing is everything. While the guards were still hauling Kennedy toward the exit, Elon, unaware of what had just happened, cracked his now infamous joke about old folks sneaking into tech events. The audience laughed, the spotlight hit, and Kennedy disappeared into the shadows. But Riley had captured all of it. Later that night, she sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through the footage. Something gnawed at her. She zoomed in. "Wait a minute." She opened a new tab, typed gray-haired Senator Louisiana, and the first result that popped up was his name. Her jaw dropped. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They dragged out a U.S. senator." She posted the video with the caption, "I didn't know who he was, but I knew this felt wrong. Turns out it was Senator John Kennedy. Watch how they treated him." By morning, the world would know. And nothing. Not security spin, not billionaire charm, not corporate silence, could stop what was coming. The sun had barely risen when Riley's video hit 10 million views. It spread like a digital wildfire, across TikTok, then X, then morning news feeds, then primetime. The hashtags were brutal and unrelenting. # dragged senator, # AI forum disgrace, # Kennedy deserved better. News anchors replayed the footage in slow motion, the senator's arm being yanked, Elon's smirking joke, the audience laughing like a sitcom track while a man of quiet integrity was pushed out of the frame. But it was what happened next that truly flipped the script. By 10 a.m., Riley was on 3 morning shows. She didn't plan it. She didn't want attention. But everyone wanted to hear from the girl with the phone. On air, she sat nervously, wearing the same Berkeley hoodie she wore the day before, eyes wide, but voice steady. "I didn't know who he was," she admitted, "but I knew what I saw didn't feel right, so I hit record." One anchor leaned in. "Did he say anything while being dragged out?" Riley nodded. "Yeah," he said. "There's no need for force. I'm happy to leave if you explain." That's all. He wasn't angry. He was calm, like he'd been through worse. Her words hit people harder than any headline, because it wasn't just the disrespect. It was the fact that Kennedy, a sitting senator, didn't pull rank, didn't yell, didn't threaten. He was removed like a nobody and carried himself like a somebody anyway. But the real twist came at noon. A leaked security footage clip surfaced from inside the event, an angle never meant for public view. The camera caught the entire moment from above. The guards grabbing Kennedy, Jared's smug expression in the background, and, most damning of all, Elon Musk watching the scene unfold on a backstage monitor just moments before stepping onto the stage. He saw it. He knew. And then, he still made the joke. This was the moment everything snapped. Public outrage exploded. Elon's social media silence only made it worse. Influencers who once praised him started deleting posts. Tech analysts called it a catastrophic misread of human decency. Even Elon's own employees at the foundation began leaking anonymous statements. One wrote, "We invited Senator Kennedy to listen. Not only did we fail to welcome him, we let our own hubris humiliate him." Kennedy, meanwhile, said nothing. He didn't tweet. He didn't go on cable news. He didn't release a statement. For nearly 36 hours, the man at the center of the storm remained silent. But that silence wasn't retreat. It was preparation. Because behind the scenes, Kennedy was making calls, not to lawyers, not to PR firms, to community leaders, educators, students, church groups. He wasn't planning a press conference. He was planning a gathering. But before that could happen, something else surfaced, and it hit even harder than the footage. An old interview resurfaced from 4 years ago. Kennedy was speaking at a town hall in a small Louisiana parish, answering a question from a young coder about the future of AI. He said, "We can't just talk about artificial intelligence. We need to talk about artificial empathy, because when machines make decisions, someone still programs the heart behind them. And if we don't teach dignity, the code will always fail us." That quote spread across social media like a rallying cry. People started sharing their own stories. Veterans who felt ignored in tech spaces. Older citizens turned away from innovation hubs. Small-town teachers overwhelmed by smart classroom systems they were never trained to use. The story was no longer about one man being dragged out. It was about how the world treats those it thinks don't belong. But the most haunting moment came during a live panel on CNN when the host played both clips back to back. Kennedy being dragged, then Elon's joke, followed by the leaked backstage footage. There was a pause. Then the host asked the panel, "What if that had been your father?" Silence. Then one tech investor, normally a staunch defender of Elon, shook his head slowly and said, "I think we've forgotten how to tell the difference between power and grace. And this was a failure of grace." It wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a reckoning. By nightfall, Riley's video had passed 30 million views. But what made it powerful wasn't just the views, it was the comments. Thousands of people writing, "This could have been my dad," or "This is why I stopped trusting tech culture," or simply, "I see him now." Kennedy still hadn't spoken, but the world was listening. and they were ready to hear what he had to say. The auditorium was nothing like the AI forum. No crystal chandeliers, no LED walls, no designer suits. Just a community center gymnasium in Baton Rouge with folding chairs, buzzing ceiling lights, and a simple podium set beneath an old basketball hoop. Yet the air inside was thick with anticipation, the kind that made silence feel louder than applause. People from every walk of life filled the room. Students clutching notebooks, grandparents in worn flannel, local tech workers, veterans, teachers, and more than a few who had never attended anything remotely political. They weren't here for a press stunt. They were here because something had been broken in public, and this place felt like the first real effort to fix it. At exactly 6 p.m., Senator John Kennedy stepped quietly onto the stage. He wasn't flanked by aides. He wasn't reading from a script. He wore the same kind of plain gray suit he always did. And when he spoke, it wasn't with the bluster of outrage or the coldness of calculation. It was steady, measured, human. "Good evening," he began, his voice unshaken. "2 days ago, I walked into a room filled with some of the brightest minds on the planet. And I walked out being treated like I didn't belong. That's not new for a lot of people. But this time, someone hit record." The room was quiet, every pair of eyes locked on him. "I didn't come here to shame anyone," he continued. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because what happened to me, what millions of people watched unfold on a screen, isn't just about me. It's about what happens when power forgets humility, when access replaces decency, and when the future becomes a private party instead of a shared road." You could feel the shift in the room. People leaned forward. A young woman in the second row wiped her eyes. "But let me tell you what gives me hope," Kennedy said, his voice warming. "It wasn't the media. It wasn't the outrage. It was a student, a young woman who didn't know who I was, but knew what she saw wasn't right. She didn't scroll past it. She didn't stay quiet. She hit record." The audience turned to look at Riley, who sat in the front row, cheeks flushed. Kennedy gestured to her with a nod of deep respect. "She reminded me, and maybe reminded all of us, that you don't need a title to stand up for what's right. You just need a moment, and the courage not to look away." Applause broke out, not in a wave, but a thunderclap. Then came the real twist. "I've invited Elon Musk to join us tonight," Kennedy said, his tone even. The room went still. Gasps. Heads turned. "I sent a message. I asked him not for an apology, but for a conversation. Because this isn't about canceling anyone. It's about correcting the course." For a few seconds, the crowd held its breath, eyes drifting to the door as if half expecting Elon to walk through it. He didn't. But Kennedy didn't seem disappointed. He simply nodded. "I don't blame him for not showing up. The truth is, I didn't always know how to show up either. There were times in my life when I ignored people who didn't look like me, think like me, or vote like me. But I'm learning. And the minute we stop learning, especially from the people who have no voice, we stop earning the right to lead." The silence that followed was heavier than any cheer. He paused, then delivered the line that would later go viral across every platform. "Innovation without empathy is just vanity dressed up in code." Phones lit up, cameras raised, TikToks were already being clipped before he stepped off stage. But he wasn't finished. He walked down from the podium and stood at eye level with the crowd. "I'm launching an initiative called the Dignity Circuit. It's a traveling town hall that brings tech leaders, public servants, and everyday citizens into the same rooms. We're not going to wait for the future to fix itself. We're going to build it together." As the applause grew again, Riley stood beside him. Her voice was soft but strong. "I never expected this," she said. "I just knew what I saw didn't feel right. My brother was once dragged out of a tech interview because they thought he was a janitor. That story didn't go viral. It just faded. So when I saw it happening again, I didn't want to let it fade this time." Kennedy placed a hand on her shoulder, visibly moved. Before the night ended, attendees were handed small cards that read, "Don't scroll past injustice. Record it, report it, reflect on it, and remember, silence is a choice." Outside the community center, the air smelled like magnolia and asphalt. People didn't rush out. They lingered, talking in clusters, shaking hands, exchanging contacts. Something rare had just happened. Not a scandal, not a speech, a spark. And by midnight, that spark was already lighting fires across the country. By sunrise the next morning, the spark from Baton Rouge had become a blaze. Clips from the event flooded social media. Kennedy's quote, "Innovation without empathy is just vanity dressed up in code," was trending in 4 countries. It was on T-shirts, quoted in newsletters, printed on cardboard signs outside tech company campuses. Even those who barely followed politics were sharing it with captions like, "Finally, someone said it," and "This hit harder than any TED Talk." But while the world praised his words, somewhere in a corner of Silicon Valley, a billionaire was unraveling. Elon Musk, the man who once thrived on shock and swagger, was not having a good week. His team had begged him to apologize, to issue a statement, to at least acknowledge the growing outrage. But Elon didn't do humility. He did dominance, or at least he used to. But the more he stayed silent, the more people spoke out. Engineers from his own companies began leaking stories, minor humiliations, condescending remarks, internal memos mocking older workers. A pattern was forming, and it was ugly. And then came the email. An anonymous employee at Elon's foundation leaked a message that had been sent to staff the day after Kennedy's ejection. The subject line was brutal. "Senator who?" The body of the email mocked the incident, referred to Kennedy as Grandpa Glitch, and even included a meme of the moment he was being dragged, photoshopped with a low battery symbol above his head. It was meant to be an inside joke, but when it went public, the laughter stopped cold. That meme was the final straw. Sponsors began to withdraw from upcoming tech summits. A major university canceled a joint research deal with Musk's AI firm. Influential voices in the tech community, many of whom had once idolized him, began publicly distancing themselves. "This isn't the future we signed up for," one tweeted. "Power without humanity is just another form of failure." The backlash reached a boiling point when Kennedy appeared live on the Today Show. He wasn't angry. He wasn't dramatic. He was, as always, composed. "I never wanted to become a symbol," he told the host. "But if my humiliation becomes the reason we start treating each other better, then I'll take it. I just hope the next person doesn't have to be a senator to be treated with basic respect." That line hit hard, because it told the truth. If a U.S. senator could be humiliated that way, what about everyone else? And then, finally, Elon spoke. At an impromptu press conference outside one of his AI labs, he stood behind a sleek podium, wearing his trademark black t-shirt and sunglasses, but there was no swagger in his voice. No grin, just a man cornered by consequences. "I made a mistake," he said. "I underestimated the moment. I underestimated the man. I watched it happen and said nothing. I regret that." But the apology didn't land the way he expected. It came too late. It lacked the one thing Kennedy had carried from the beginning: sincerity. And then came the most devastating moment yet. A national town hall event aired on CNN, titled "The Future and the Forgotten." Kennedy was the keynote speaker, but the format was unique. Instead of a speech, it was a conversation. He sat in a circle with a janitor from New Jersey, a retired teacher from Arizona, a young app developer from Chicago, and Riley. Each shared their own experiences of being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated, not by laws, but by culture, by systems designed to value the loudest, flashiest voices in the room. When it was Kennedy's turn, He didn't take the spotlight. He turned to Riley. "You changed everything," he said. "Not because you had a platform, but because you used your eyes, your phone, and your heart. That's real power." The audience stood. Not because someone told them to, but because it was earned. Back in California, Elon Musk watched the town hall alone from his private office. No entourage, no applause, just a man staring at a screen as the world moved on, without him at the center of it. He didn't tweet that night. He didn't trend. And for the first time in years, he didn't speak. Meanwhile, Kennedy flew home to Louisiana. No fanfare, no limo, just a man with a carry-on and a purpose. Because the movement wasn't about winning a fight. It was about opening eyes. And they were finally, truly open. 2 weeks after the town hall aired, something unexpected began to happen. Schools started requesting copies of the footage. A superintendent in Ohio asked if she could screen it during faculty development. A tech startup in Austin replaced their Monday team meeting with a discussion about empathy in design. People weren't just reacting to the story, they were integrating it into their lives. And that, more than anything, proved to Senator John Kennedy that the moment had transformed into a movement. He sat at his desk in Baton Rouge, sunlight pouring through the window, leafing through hundreds of handwritten letters. Not tweets, not emails, real ink on paper. One was from a 14-year-old in Minnesota. "Senator Kennedy, I showed your video to my class. My teacher cried. Thank you for making me believe you can be kind and powerful at the same time." Another from a retired bus driver in Detroit simply read, "I don't know much about AI, but I know dignity when I see it. You gave it to all of us." Kennedy exhaled slowly, the weight of it settling in his chest. Not as a burden, but as purpose. The Dignity Circuit, his initiative to connect technologists and ordinary people through real-world dialogue, had already scheduled stops in 7 cities. And Riley? She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a partner. She'd become the face of the program's youth wing, hosting sessions on digital responsibility, speaking on podcasts, and reminding millions that one small act can change everything. But even as the country embraced the message, the deeper work was just beginning. Behind the scenes, Kennedy was assembling something bigger. A bipartisan ethics board. Not for laws, but for influence. It wasn't about regulation. It was about responsibility. CEOs, scientists, public servants, and even artists were being quietly invited to join. Their mission? To ensure that the voices shaping the future never forget the people living in the present. No red tape, no partisanship, just accountability built on truth. Then came the moment that solidified it all. A global tech summit was being held in New York, the same kind of high-profile event where Kennedy had once been dragged out like a trespasser. This time he was invited as a keynote guest. But he didn't go alone. He brought Riley. He brought a classroom teacher. He brought a senior from a digital literacy program. He brought people who wouldn't normally make it past security. When he took the stage, he didn't speak immediately. He looked around the glittering room of influencers and investors and said, "I want you to meet the future." And they're already in the room. You just weren't looking before. Then he stepped back and let them speak. That speech, if you could even call it that, was shared across every major platform. Not because it was fiery or dramatic, but because it was generous. Powerful people had been taught to dominate the room. Kennedy had taught them to share it. In the weeks that followed, the conversation didn't die. It deepened. Universities began partnering with the Dignity Circuit. Major platforms added empathy training to their algorithm teams. Even Elon Musk, now far removed from the spotlight, posted a single message on his feed. Power is loud, but dignity echoes longer. It was unclear if he wrote it himself. But Kennedy didn't respond. He didn't need to, because by then, it was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about helping everyone remember what's right. And for the millions who had watched him stay calm, get humiliated, rise again, and lead not with vengeance but with vision, he had already won. Not just the moment, but the meaning behind it. And if you're still here, still listening, ask yourself this. When it's your moment, will you look away, or will you hit record? If your answer is clear, then share this story. Start the next conversation. And never forget, dignity doesn't come from status. It comes from how you choose to show up, even when no one is watching.